First of all, the Civil Rights Act 1957 kind of came as a result of all of the Brown versus Topeka, Little Rock and the Montgomery bus boycott in particular. The main thing it did is was sort of re-emphasise the idea that black people should, by law, have the right to vote. And a commission was set up by the federal government to investigate and to enforce the law, so that black people in states where they're being sort of excluded from voting, the federal government was stating in their act that they had a right to come in and force these states to let black people vote. It's easier said than done. The Greensboro Sit-In is actually next, even though it's not chronologically on your sheet from right to left. Greensboro Sit-Ins are next, where some students were fed up in Greensboro, some university students, or college as they call it in America, fed up that they had segregated lunch counters, cafes effectively, and so they went and sat at a white one, and they were refused service, so they stayed there. And it snowballed. More and more people came to join them the next day, and the next day after that, and so on and so forth. I better eat them in a minute. And the racists acted unreasonably, as you could expect. Sort of fought back. Some people were assaulted, and they tried to dig their heels in, but it didn't work because there was loads of media attention. All it did was create more support for the civil rights movement and inspired sit-ins to happen across the country. James Meredith is a little bit like Little Rock High, but university, and it's only one fella. James Meredith wanted to go to the University of Mississippi. Mississippi was definitely a very racist place at the time. And the racists tried to stop him from coming. The army was called in. The president had to call the army in. There was huge riots and loads of people were injured. Very, very embarrassing for the president. All over the media, all around the world. And I think 300, you'll have to check that in the textbook, but certainly a number of soldiers had to stay there for the whole time that James Meredith was at the University of Mississippi, escorting him to and from lessons or lectures until he got his degree, which is absolutely crazy. The Freedom Riders were also inspired by what had happened before with the sit-ins, with Little Rock, with Montgomery bus boycott in particular, because some states still had segregated buses. So they chose to go on an interstate coach trip, starting in the north, going through these racist states and going in the white washrooms and the white cafes and things like that along the way. And of course they were beaten when they tried to do it very often. The one I already told you about, which sticks in your head, in one place, they were firebombed, and then the racists tried to hold the doors shut of the bus to burn them to death. This is the sort of thing that was going on in the Freedom Rides. It was one ride, initially, that took a long time to get where it wanted to go because things kept happening to the riders, and other people got on in support and off of these buses, but then it inspired other Freedom Rides afterwards. Again, the results, more support for the civil rights movement because of the ridiculous actions of the racists, and also the federal government stepped in to try to enforce desegregation across all of the southern states with buses, which was already the law, but they had to step in and do something about it when it was so embarrassing. Albany is a little bit of an anomaly because Martin Luther King turned up, they tried to do protests and marches, Martin Luther King was arrested and put in jail, all with the intention of trying to desegregate Albany, but it was a rare example of them not actually managing it. All the racists did was shut all the public areas that they were trying to desegregate, including the schools, public parks and that sort of thing, and it stayed like that. So it's kind of seen as a success. It's not like the racists won because they were inconvenienced by what they took to do in reaction to it. But it didn't have as great a success in all the other examples. The Greensboro Sit-In worked. Things in Greensboro had to desegregate. James Meredith got to have his degree. The Freedom Riders successfully managed to get the federal government to enforce desegregation on the buses across all southern states. In Albany, they didn't really have the same level of success. The SNCC was sort of came out the Greensboro Sit-In. It was a student movement, nicknamed SNCC, but they basically were inspired by Martin Luther King and used peaceful methods to try to get their own way. They were heavily involved in the Freedom Rides, and in the voter education program, which in 1962 President Kennedy decided needed to be set up. It's not like black people needed to know how to tick a box in a vote form. It was the process of registering to vote, which the southern states made very, very difficult and didn't try to help black people to do successfully because they didn't want them to vote. The voter education project, which the SNCC was a big driving part of, tried to educate black people into how they could register to vote. And it had success. Hundreds of thousands of people who previously didn't vote registered to vote because of the voter education project. And there's some of the subject knowledge you need to know today.